Welcome to the Jakarta-Post Up Close webinar 5G and the Future of Tech in Indonesia. Thank you very much for finding time and joining today's program. My name is Indah Oktavianti. I'm a journalist for the Jakarta-Post and I will be your MC for today. The Jakarta-Post, together with our vast network of credible sources, has been hosting webinar series through the Jakarta-Post Up Close program to educate and inform the public, exploring different types of topics in a digital format. Today's webinar will talk about the fifth generations of 5G cellular network technology impacting the way for economic digital transformations in Indonesia. It is a very important issue to be discussed, but before that, I would like to explain our agenda for today. Firstly, we will have a 15-minute keynote speech from the Communication and Information Minister, Pak Johnny G. Plate, as he will talk about the urgency of improving internet infrastructure and government's effort in addressing the problems. Following that, we will commence our live webinar session featuring 4 distinguished guests serving as today's panelists. We are very excited to have them on our platform today. Firstly, we have Pak Denny Setiawan. He is the head of Indonesia's 5G task force. Good afternoon, Pak Denny. It's very nice to have you with us today, Pak.
Good afternoon, Tri. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you very much, Pak Denny. Second, we have Mr. Hari Venkataramani. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Pak.
That's perfect. Thank you.
He is a partner at Kearney, and very nice to meet you, Pak.
Good to be here.
Next one, I would like to greet Mr. Peter Lofling, who is the Varnish General Manager in APAC. Good evening, Pak Peter.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today, Pak.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, we also have Mr. Dharmesh Malhotra, currently serve as the Managing Director Global Service Provider, ASEAN of CISCO. Hello, Pak Dharmesh. It's very nice to meet you, Pak.
Oh, same here as well. Looking forward to.
Thank you. So the 60 minutes discussion panel will be moderated by the Jakarta-Post journalist, Norman Harsono. Hi, Norman. I'm very excited to have you in this webinar. And after that, we will also have a 30-minute questions and answer sessions. If you, audience, have any question, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box on your Zoom app, and you are welcome to use either English or Bahasa Indonesia. As a quick note, good journalism needs your support, so please consider subscribing to the Jakarta-Post as you will gain access to our premium content, including our deep investigation reports and many more, with only 600,000 rupiah per 12 months. You can easily go to the jakartapost.com/packages for more subscriptions offer. And also, this webinar is brought to you by Varnish, Telkomsel, and CISCO. So, Norman will start to commence this webinar sessions. Without further ado, Norman, the platform is yours now.
Great. Thank you very much, Trin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Norman Harsono. I am, as my colleague mentioned, a journalist at the Jakarta-Post, and I shall be your host for today's discussion, where we will talk about 5G. Now, several studies have shown that there is big potential for 5G in Indonesia, whether that is, according to one study, adding 4.4 million new jobs or adding 2.8 quadrillion rupiah to the GDP by 2030. At the same time, however, many challenges remain. According to one study, we need at least $4 billion worth of investment to get 5G going. There's also the issue of spectrum availability and, of course, of market demand. Who will consume this 5G technology? Nevertheless, the government has taken steps to bring 5G into Indonesia, and notably establishing a 5G task force, who is here with us today, as well as adding 5G technology into the midterm development plan, 2020 until 2024. In other words, if all goes well, Indonesia could have 5G latest by 2024. All our speakers are with us here today. Thank you very much for being with us here, gentlemen. So without further ado, let's kick off this webinar with a pre-recorded keynote speech from Communications and Information Minister Johnny G. Plate, who will outline basically the big picture of what the government expects with ICT technology, particularly 5G, going forward. I believe the team has prepared the video. Yes, so take it away. Okay.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita sekalian. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Jakarta-Post for giving me the opportunity to discuss the digital transformation progress in Indonesia. I am hopeful that today's event will disseminate new insights on Indonesia's 5G and future tech adoption. The COVID-19 pandemic has accentuated how our world is rapidly changing, including the process of digital transformation in Indonesia. The Central Bank of Indonesia has also indicated that until August 2020, there had been a total of 140 million e-commerce transactions in Indonesia. Subsequently, such progress contributes to Indonesia's information and communication technology (ICT) sector, which has remained robust despite the pandemic, with a double-digit growth at 10.83% in the second quarter and 10.61% in the third quarter of 2020 year-on-year, as reported by the Indonesia Central Agency on Statistics. Grasping this momentum, Indonesia's Ministry of Communications and Informatics, so-called MCI, through the Telecommunications and Information Accessibility Agency, BAKTI, strives to work on our best efforts to bridge the existing digital divide in Indonesia. Today, we have rolled out more than 348,000 kilometers of land and undersea fiber optic cable, including over 12,000 kilometers of BAKTI's Palapa Ring, National Fiber Optic Backbone Network. Indonesia has also built more than 500,000 base transceiver stations, BTS, and utilized 9 satellites to fulfill our domestic demand for adequate connectivity. In addition, we are also planning to launch the high-throughput satellite 150 gigabit per second Setiawan in the third quarter of 2023. We have continuously improved the digital infrastructure, including in all villages that haven't yet been reached by 4G connection. However, the big task to ensure adequate, accessible, and affordable 4G as the basis to develop 5G network remains urgent. Therefore, Indonesia is currently seeking to accelerate its 5G spectrum allocations initiative. It is imperative to farm and reform the 5G spectrum to meet the demand of 2047 MHz frequency spectrum for mobile broadband both for 4G and 5G by 2024 in all levels, such as 700, 800, 900 MHz coverage layer, 1.8, 2.3, 2.6, 3.3, 3.5 GHz capacity layer, and 28, 26 GHz super data layer. In moving towards the 5G deployment, Indonesia has conducted 10 trials throughout 2017 to 2019 to test the potential applications of 5G network, mostly in the high band of 28 GHz. In 2020, Indonesia is also currently undergoing the 11th trial to explore the possibility of 5G network and the fixed satellite service, FSS, to be utilized in simultaneously frequency lines at 3.5 GHz. Additionally, Indonesia is seeking to optimally utilize microwave link as the second option after fiber optic. Since the super high frequency of E-band, 70 to 80 gigahertz, and V-band, 58 to 60 gigahertz, may also serve high capacity for the broadband service. It is also important to note that 5G deployment will demand large capital expenditure and will require advanced digital ecosystem. The new capital city of Indonesia will be the best and potential candidate city to deploy first 5G in Indonesia, aside from some industrial estates, which may also be possible. The MCI is also supporting the accelerations of digital transformations through 4 comprehensive pillars, such as the deployment of more powerful digital infrastructure, the improvement of the digital literacy and human resources as a means to upskill and reskill Indonesia's digital talent, the adoptions of supporting technologies, and the primary legislation in the ICT sector, including through the completions of Personal Data Protection Law or Indonesia's General Data Protection Regulations. Notwithstanding the importance of the first 3 pillars, the last pillar on regulations reaffirms our view on the imperative to uphold and improve data sovereignty, including cross-border data flow based on the principle of transparency, lawfulness, fairness, and reciprocity. Based on these principles, together we can foster a digital ecosystem that is conducive for innovations and investments. In addition, the Omnibus Law on Job Creation, Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, will also allow telecommunications operators to share the spectrums for the new technology such as 5G. Distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, let me quote a Latin phrase, per aspera ad astra, through hardship to the stars. Among the stars in the skies rest our great natural resources, radio spectrum, which requires our hard work to utilize and optimize it. 5G network will be a game changer with far-reaching impacts to connectivity as the backbone of digital transformation and a key enabler of economic growth. We believe that we must work hard to carry out our great task of adopting new technology to improve our productivity through the 5G network in the near future. The government of Indonesia has initiated our affirmative actions for the 5G deployment. Yet, as we are all in this together, I call all stakeholders to collaborate and to work hand in hand for the 5G deployment. Through strong cooperations, I believe that any hardship in 5G deployment will be overcome, and the 5G network will have Indonesia hooked into a giant leap in transforming Indonesia as a smart nation. To the advanced Indonesia and to the star. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Minister Johnny. I believe the minister's words has given us some ground to work on. If I could quickly summarize some of the key points from the minister's keynote speech just now. The government is well aware that digitalization is speeding up in Indonesia thanks to the pandemic. and that government policy is at the moment oriented towards addressing the digital divide. The minister mentioned laying down several kilometers worth of cable, as well as building a very big high throughput satellite. Nevertheless, to use minister's words, 5G remains pertinent. The minister again mentioned several efforts to speed up 5G, such as freeing up spectrum, the FSS satellite, they're tinkering with microwave, and are of course also working on a personal data protection law. Again, thank you, Minister Johnny. And so now, if the minister has given us a broad picture of what the government expects with digital technology, our next speaker will give us a more specific picture of what it means exactly in terms of 5G. We have Bapak Denny Setiawan, head of the 5G task force. Bapak Denny, thank you for being here with us. A quick introduction. Denny is an electrical engineer by training. He is officially the Director of Spectrum Policy and Planning at the Communications and Information Ministry. Today, he is here with us as head of the 5G task force. But Denny here is basically the man you want to speak to when it comes to 5G regulations in Indonesia. I believe Pak Denny has prepared a short presentation for us here today, after which we shall go into a quick talk show. Is that correct, Pak Denny?
Yes, Norman.
All right. Go ahead, Pak. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pak Norman, a fellow panelist and participant. So I would like to present the 5G task force of Indonesia, and quite brief, and then we can continue on the discussion. Next, please. Next slide, please. So the task force is established in August this year, and consists of several working groups, and there's also some group of experts that including academics, industry, and operators. There's some working group on spectrum planning, as the minister mentioned about the affiliate of spectrum, including this low band, mid band, high band. There's also we discussed about the flexibility of spectrum and also the solution for private network. The second group, we're talking about the business model, the collaboration scheme, the new format of collaboration operation, and I think the one also the spectrum fee policy. Is talking about the competition also. The third working group, we also have to prepare about the infrastructure. One of the challenges we have is fiberization or passive infrastructure, particularly small cell, and infrastructure sharing, and then harmonization between the government, central government, and the local government. I think that's the big challenge. And fourth is the working group of device and ecosystem. So there are several issues we're talking about, which is the local content, network security, local industry, and specific platform and application, on the 5G, and also the readiness of the human resources of the people of Indonesia, the developer, the startup, and we need to have the capability on to become player on this 5G market. And last but not least, I think this is the regulation. So we just currently finished the omnibus law was enacted on the early November this month, and we have now being pushed to finish the government decree of implementation. I think it's already put in the public consultation now, and also some improvement of existing regulation to facilitate the implementation of 5G. So all in all, the task force targeted by the end of the 2021, but we believe that we can have also some several results along the way. So this is what we have done during this recently. So we have, for example, the device ecosystem. we collaborate together with the JSMA and one of the university to establish the lab Open Run first in Southeast Asia, but we also quite extensive discuss with our other ecosystem as well, regulated as well. We now very things involved in the omnibus law and the implementation of the government decree, and also the business model. The infrastructure meeting we discussed with APJATEL, this is the Association of the Telecommunication Infrastructure, and how to expedite the fiberization infrastructure, the challenge with the local government. And I think most of the study, most of the tasks we did in the spectrum plan, we have couple conference. We co-host a virtual conference in August, the Asia Pacific Spectrum Conference. And we did a lot of material from all over the world, from industry and other countries. And we have also collaborated with the US Embassy. We discussed with FCC on the 5G fast plan and incentive auction. And recently, we also involved in the discussion with the fellow Asia Pacific telecommunity countries and policy and regulatory forum, set 5G policy updates, so we can have benchmark with other colleagues in Asia Pacific as well. I think just 2 days, recent 2 days, we have a discussion with the ASEAN conference, same vision of friends with other regulators and advisors. So we have to run fast, because otherwise the other countries, our neighbors, also run fast as well. Okay, so this is the challenge we have. I think I would like to focus on spectrum. Our current situation, right, on the allocation, we have around 737 megahertz spectrum already assigned for mobile broadband. And for the, I think the notice that we have already adopted the neutral technology policy. So meaning that actually you can have in this band 2G, 3G, 4G, even 5G, but depend on the spectrum you have. But it's not enough, right? So we would have to have the new spectrum, and we put already in the roadmap, our commitment roadmap, MCI roadmap, as mentioned by the ministry. So we are targeting 1,310 megahertz bandwidth, which include consists of the super data layer, capacity layer, and coverage layer. I think already mentioned by the ministry very well. So I will not repeat that, but I will focus on what the challenge we had. What challenge we had, I think what our effort there. The very difficult challenge is 700 megahertz. This is for rural areas, and it's very difficult job. We already have discussed with the parliament for almost more than 5 years, and thank God, finally the omnibus law stipulated finished, completed in 2020 November this year. So we have now deadline for analog switch off. It's 2 years. So now, parallel with our team, we discussed, my colleagues from the director of the broadcasting discussed with our industry, television industry, how to speed up, how to have a simultaneous simulcast, and how to switch off in the analog TV. And the other challenge on the mid-band, I think this is very important for capacity, is 2.6 and from 5. 2.6, we have already satellite in place and on air for pay TV, and it's much difficult because the location everywhere. And the assignment is until 2024. And 3.5, we have 7 satellites, Indonesian satellite on board, and 56 transponder operating this band. And the latest lifetime probably 2024. But in this band, I think most of the use is not satellite. It's not broadcasting. Most of the use is for VSAT. So we have tried to have some coexistence scheme, how to put this between satellite and 5G, can coexist in the geographical scheme, for example. And last WRC in Somerset, Egypt, we joined IMT and the distributor in the band 3.3 and 3.6 gigahertz. So this is the indication that we are very serious to put the 3.5 gigahertz as the 5G identified band as well, as long I think we align also with our ASEAN colleagues and also ASEAN Pacific countries. Next. So this is I think what we already made the minister mentioned. So I think so would like to put that we most of the test trial in the millimeter wave, something like the sport like ASEAN Games, and then remote teaching, holograph, and smart city, and so on and so forth, Industry 4.0 is showcase. But this year, next please, next slide. And yeah, I think first ever we do in the capacity band, and we focus on coexistence. We have done, I think, this 2 months. I think during the trial we have some problem with one of our members got his family got COVID-19, and it means so the trial stopped for a while, and then we continue again in early November. But we have done the test, and this is very difficult trial and coexistence between satellite and 5G. We do in the Telkom University in Bandung, and we support by the operators and the industry and academy. I think we have some result, and we try to put what the condition, what the optimization among the satellite and 5G. Rule of thumb is 5G in the cities and satellite in rural, but how to put to make it happen? I think that's the challenge that we need to have study both technically and economically. I think that's my presentation, and then we can have a discussion. Pak Norman.
Yes, great. Thank you for your presentation, Pak Denny. That was a very technically comprehensive presentation of what the government is planning to do, specifically in the case of 5G. I want to start by asking about, you mentioned the analog switch off, and then there's a deadline 2 years to complete the analog switch off. What does that plan look like for now? What are you going to do over, what does the government plan to do over the next 2 years?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do, right? We have actually our some of the commercial TV and also our TVRI already have on air, already is already on air on the television, digital TV, but not all. So for example, in Jakarta, if you tune your digital TV, I hope that you can buy the set-top box or buy the new one, right? Used to be not all the major cities already on air, but now, yeah, we have discussed with most of them. Hopefully, and I hope that we can have, I think, hopefully all of the existing TV would join simulcast. And then we need to have some penetration of set-top box, right? That everybody can have, can listen, can watch the program of existing analog TV through the digital, and it's socialization and so on and so forth. In parallel, we need also to build, to deploy expansion of digital TV. So not only in Jakarta, but also in big cities, other cities outside of Java, and so on and so forth. So the important is that to make sure that the program of TV still can be received by digital, while we have simulcast, that people can receive by analog digital. But we have to encourage the content of digital so that people can have migrate a smooth migration with from the receiver. I think that's big task, and Well, I think we believe that with this new law, all the parties will support this activity.
Okay. Could I go a bit deeper into that? What about for houses or Indonesians living in more remote areas, let's say small cities, islands? How would analog switch out play for them, based on thinking so far?
Well, actually, they already switched off.
Okay.
Why? Because in the rural areas, there's no electricity there, right? And then if you go to Kampung outside of Java, for example, even the rural areas in Java, they're using satellite.
Okay.
Right. So actually, the problem is in the analog TV is mostly in the big cities.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's a solid point. Also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Denny, but the focus of the government for 5G is the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, I think so we have not only one particular spectrum. We said all the operators they'll have all, lower capacity and super capacity layer. 3.5 is one of the potential because it's a mass market. It's already almost global ecosystem, right? And the challenge that we have already satellite in place is not only one like other countries, but we have 7 satellite on. But we believe, we can have, we will have some solution.
Okay.
We will have some solution, and then I think the solution is that we try to have a win-win solution. The postulate is that 5G is for big cities, right? And satellite in rural, you can have. I don't believe the 5G in 3.5 in the rural areas. How you get money and then the facilities and support, right? The problem is because they compete in big cities. How we can have such mechanism, right, that they can coexist both geographically and economically. I think that's the challenge. But we're ready. I mean, we have some study and we have some solution like other countries do. I think.
Okay. In that case, could you share a bit? What is the update? What is the latest update so far in trying to free the spectrum for 5G? You mentioned you had some meetings, and then there's planning to do to work together with I think FSS and 5G. So what's the
satellite? Yeah, I think the satellite we have discussed several times with satellite industry and mobile industry. We also asked the universities, academics, and it's quite challenging, right? But we say that this is what we're going to do, and then but also in the parallel we also try to encourage the satellite industry to go higher, to go to the higher frequency. Yeah, we try to also provide some prepare some new regulation to more relax, more collaborative with global satellite industry. So I think that's in this maybe it's not loose, but maybe we shift the geographical. But we need also the capacity as the mentioned by the high throughput capacity. So we encourage the satellite industry to go to KU band, KA band, not only within the national satellite, but also collaborate with the global satellite industry.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pak Denny. And that's 15 minutes already. Thank you again for your presentation in the talk show. Very, very nice, technical, comprehensive explanation of. So again, Pak Denny has given us a look at what Indonesia specifically is planning for 5G. That brings us to our next speaker, who will talk about what's happening on a more regional level, specifically on a Southeast Asia level. Welcoming Mr. Hari Venkataramani, partner at management consultancy firm Kearney. Mr. Hari has over a decade of experience with companies in Asia Pacific and the Middle East, with a focus on the ICT industry in recent years. I believe Mr. Hari has prepared a presentation for us. Hello, Mr. Hari.
Hi. Can you see the presentation?
Yes. Mr. Hari, you have 50 minutes. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be speaking this evening. So maybe I'm going to be talking about 5G, the potential in ASEAN, what we see everywhere else, what we see as the potential in Indonesia. So if we get into the first page. So what we see the case for 5G, I think there's been a lot of excitement around 5G globally. There's been a lot of excitement also in the region, and it's come from industry, it's come from the public, but most of all, it's come from the governments everywhere else. The expectation is it's going to drive significant economic and social benefits. But on the other hand, it is also going to be extremely expensive to roll out. I think some of the numbers that we heard talked about are tens of billions of dollars in the case of a country like Indonesia in over the next 3 to 5 years, right? So it's clear. And for operators, then the question becomes, is there a business case and a business viability? To answer this question, I think globally you can see some of the advanced countries here. Let's take the example of Korea. What you're starting to see is an encouragement from the ICT ministry to facilitate an ecosystem of use cases and value generation that will make it viable for investments to follow, because some of the initial use cases are also government related and defense related use cases. Similarly, we see something similar in Singapore with IMDA, launching a fund that will support this initiative. Japan, EU. There is a lot that's being done by governments. And why are they really doing it, right? If you look at it globally, the expectation is that it can create over 20 million jobs across the 5G value chain over the next 20 years. So these are next generation technical jobs, and these are going to be very important for many of the countries that in the high value economy. Similarly, we are also starting to see a significant global economic value added. We're talking tens of trillions of dollars over the next few years, and a significant industrial advancement and social and environmental innovation. So whether it is smart cities, whether it's traffic management, whether it's smart homes, workplaces, in some of the Western countries around aging and disabled workforce support. So there's lots of holistic use cases that 5G will enable, and significant labor and economic output that's expected. But it will require governments to kind of come in and provide be the bedrock on which the industry can build. Now, if we move forward, what are the kind of things that people are very, very excited about? Now, we have been doing at Kearney a lot of work around 5G use cases and over the last couple of years, thinking about what will 5G truly enable that is differentiated, that is, things that people are excited about. I know everybody on the call has probably heard about, robotic surgery or autonomous driving or things like that. But when we take kind of a clear-eyed view of the picture, we look at it along two dimensions, right? The one dimension is, for what use cases do you truly need 5G, right? Because there are things that you can do today on 4G or on Wi-Fi and so on, but which may not require 5G already, right? And the other axis of thinking about it is, how far out are these use cases? Are they real, or are they much more like science fiction, right? Which will come, but it might take 5, 7, 10 years to come. And when we take that kind of picture to what 5G use cases will be enabled, it is clear that in the consumer space, there will be two broad use cases in countries like in emerging markets such as Indonesia. I think the first one will be mobile broadband, kind of like 4G, but enhanced, faster, greater capacity, lower latency, which means that when you play games and so on, you'll get better performance. And the other one will be fixed wireless access, which is essentially I don't have as much fixed line connectivity, and what will really happen from a fixed wireless perspective to provide broadband into the house. These are the two big and immediate use cases that we see. And the mobile broadband use case, I think, will be used for, at least the expectation is, some virtual reality use cases, advanced gaming use cases, and so on. Now, when it comes to the industrial side, I think there is a lot of excitement. There is a lot of excitement around IoT, around sensors, so on and so forth. But this will, and 5G is expected to enable really Industry 4.0. If you look at it, right? Whether it's the industry IoT, whether it's advanced robotics, whether it's AI use cases in mobility, AR and VR, 3D printing. There's a broad range of use cases that is expected to be driven by 5G, especially on the shop floor, in mining locations, and real estate and construction, and so on and so forth. And from an ASEAN value potential perspective, over the next 5 years, we see there is almost 150 billion kind of value potential by these big technologies around IoT, advanced robotics, so on and so forth. And most of that is coming from manufacturing, and some of it is coming from logistics, some of it is coming from defense, and some from mining and construction. And those are the ones that are most relevant in the Indonesia context. Now, of that, if we look at the 140 billion or so, almost 60 to 70 billion dollars will be enabled by the presence of 5G. So 5G is really the bedrock of many of these Industry 4.0 technologies. So it is going to be really, really critical to get it right to generate a lot of value going forward. Now to make that work, though, will require the entire ecosystem to come together, and that has always been the difficult part of making some of these technologies work. And it was heartening to hear in the previous presentation, both from the minister as well as Denny, talking about some of the initiatives that are going on to build labs and test grounds to make these use cases come to life, where you bring together industries, whether it's manufacturing companies, mining companies, construction companies, together with technology providers, whether it's equipment providers, whether it's software solution providers, and so on, so that you have the full stack, and to get the telcos together, so that it is a holistic view of developing both the use case and the value potential from these use cases that can then be shared, right? I think the important thing here is to think about how to generate the value rather than how to divide the value. And that's usually where industry has failed in many of these cases. Now, what does all of this kind of mean from a global perspective? It's great. There's a lot of potential out there. There's a lot of excitement. What is really happening on the ground? If you see this, many countries have already launched. Either they are low or small scale commercial launches, or still slightly at the trial stage. Most advanced Western countries have launched in some ways, but the leaders truly in this are many of the countries in Asia, whether it's Korea, where we've seen launches for retail customers, whether we've seen it whether it's for China, where there are already a lot of users, a lot of interesting use cases that are starting to come up. The most critical thing, as Denny spoke about, has been spectrum. So countries that have been held back, so many of the countries in Europe that have been held back because of some of the spectrum challenges. And of course, COVID this year has made some things much more challenging. In ASEAN itself, we are starting to see different countries reacting differently. I think Singapore has seen the allocation of spectrum happen, the licenses have happened, and there is going to be some launches that are starting. Similarly, I think Vietnam, there's been a lot of talk of advanced use cases and launches, and we expect something similar to happen in Philippines as well pretty shortly. Malaysia, I think, has had, they were pretty far along the road before there was a little bit of a pullback, and we expect that it is going to take a little bit of time to sort that out. And it was really heartening to hear that Indonesia has clear plans to launch, and we do think there is significant potential here when the launch does happen, and the use cases around it and the value generation around it are going to be very exciting to see. Now, what does that really mean from a numbers perspective? I think we are already seeing globally 70 million plus users. If you look at it by the middle of this year, a lot of users in we expect by 2025 more than 2 billion users globally. I think that is to be expected. And if you can see that a lot of the use cases are coming from China and South Korea, I think those are going to be the most important markets. And ASEAN as a whole, we'll talk about on the next page, but penetrations are expected to get in the range of 20% to 25% by 2025, provided some of the spectrum issues can be sorted out and we can see launches in the next year or so. And whereas in the Indonesia context, we believe, and we had done this work, last year, I think the projection is to be able to get to at least 100 million subscribers by 2025. I think this potential, while it appears pretty steep, we believe it is definitely possible if we can sort out some of the teething issues and get to a launch reasonably quickly. We also do expect an overall value generation across B2B, B2C, and B2B2X and new business models that are evolving of more than 1.8 billion US dollars of gross value added. I think the key here is going to be able to find business models that can make it work for everybody and drive adoption and drive value generation. I think that is going to be the key to be able to generating this value and realizing this at the earliest. If we move on, if I look at it historically, if we look at the journey, and this is quite important to keep in mind, Indonesia has usually been 4 to 5 years behind the curve on the previous generation of technology launches from what we've seen. I think in the 5G case, we are optimistic. We definitely believe there is an opportunity to shrink that timeline. While global launches have happened last year, we think Indonesia can really kind of get ahead of the curve to do this. But doing that will require acting along 3 dimensions. I think the first one everybody's aware of, I think it's been spoken about a lot, which is spectrum. I think it is going to be really critical to find the right spectrum bands. Otherwise, launches will happen on some suboptimal bands. Number 2 is to, because there is going to be investments northwards of $10 billion even in the initial years to be able to get this up and running, and that kind of investment will require broad ecosystem to come together and infrastructure to be shared. It's not just on spectrum, but it's on towers, it's on fiber, it's on radio sites, and so on and so forth. And number 3 is to get the entire ecosystem together, whether it's technology players, whether it is whether it is system integrators, whether it is industry, so on and so forth. I think that is going to be very important to kind of make this whole thing work. And if we go to the final page, just to recap, I think potential is big, but immediate action will be needed on these 3 things. Many of these have already been covered in the omnibus law, but it is going to be quite important to get them realized on the ground. On spectrum, the question around which spectrum, how much, how quickly are important. Infrastructure is what is the extent that will be enabled, who will participate, who will be allowed to participate. How do we enable a balance between viability of the infrastructure builder as well as accelerating the rollout for the country? And from an ecosystem perspective, what is the value generation that is going to be possible, and how will that value then eventually get shared? I think those are going to be very important questions to address so that we can realize the full potential of 5G at the earliest in Indonesia and get to the $1.8 billion of gross value added and 100 million subscribers by 2025. With that, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much. I'm open for any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hari. That was spot on, 50 minutes. Thank you. Again, a very insightful presentation at what's been happening in Indonesia in comparison to Asia Pacific. I think it's very important that we know exactly where this country stands compared to other countries. Some key points, a lot of insight, but some key points that I could catch. government plays a very important role in kickstarting things with 5G, such as by investing in defense and such as by freeing spectrum policy, such as by freeing a spectrum as heavily addressed by Pak Denny. In terms of Indonesia-specific case, there is potential for, according to estimates, 100 million 5G subscriptions by 2025. Is that correct, Pak Hari?
That is correct. That is correct.
But the key here, and I think this is very quotable, it's steep but reasonable, given that we can solve the prickly issues such as spectrum. Thank you again, Pak Hari, for that insightful presentation.
Thank you.
Now, if Pak Hari and Pak Denny before that gave a more broad view of what's happening on a countrywide scale, even regional and Asia-Pacific scale, our next speaker will go into a more case-specific account of 5G. Here we have Mr. Peter Lofling. Mr. Peter has worked for over 20 years in the ICT industry and is here today as General Manager for Asia-Pacific at Varnish Software. The company is best known for its namesake software, Varnish. Hello, Mr. Peter.
Hi, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to do a little bit of different compared to the previous speaker, Mr. Hari. I will talk a little bit more about the ecosystem and what's going on there and how it works together. So let me start with, my name is Peter Löfling, and I'm the General Manager of APAC at Varnish. The agenda for today, what I will go through are who Varnish are and what we do, 5G future use cases, the digital transformation in Indonesia, and what it takes to build a 5G network from a little bit more ecosystem and technical perspective. I will also go a little bit, make it simplify a lot of stuff so we really know what we're talking about here. But let me start with Varnish. So Varnish software is a pioneer in high performance content delivery. We are powered by a very flexible caching technology. I will come back to what caching is and how it works and how it interconnects with 5G. Our solutions are very common among the world's most popular brands like Nikon, Sky, Emirates, Tesla, etc. We are actually the company behind Varnish Cache. That's a caching technology trusted by more than 10 million websites worldwide. So if we talk about 5G future use cases and digital transformation, but before going into that, what is 5G? Let us just sort of put the baseline here. And to make a very simple comparison, if 4G is a minibus, 5G is a double-decker bus with a lot of capacity for more data with a turbo. So 5G can carry more data and go much faster than 3G or 4G. But what can we actually do with 5G practically? Why are people looking forward to 5G? And how could it change the Indonesian economy? These are some of the questions I will at least try to answer and at least try to touch on during the next 15 minutes. So as Mr. Hari said, the speaker before me, 5G is a move to a more digital future. Some are calling it the fourth industrial revolution. And this is because of how much it could change how industries, stores, sell, any sales go and how the economy is going to be structured going forward. This is where a futuristic technology like Internet of Things and artificially intelligent become really, really integrated in the economy. Internet of Things, if we're going to make a simplified description of it, are things that are fitted with sensors and software for the purpose of connecting and exchanging data with each other over the internet. And going forward, many of these things will be connected to 5G and the internet. And this will happen within factories, warehouse, stores, etc. They're going to be able to manage the production. They're going to manage the industrial processes remotely or automatically. And as we all see in the newspaper, we talk about self-driving cars, etc. They will need to be able, they will need to communicate via 5G base stations. Another important thing that we'll see 5G will do is make high-speed internet access more easily available. This without the need for fixed infrastructure digging like fiber cables and putting switches and routers in each home. This is very important, especially go to rural areas so we can reach more people and get them involved in the economy. If we do this, we get a much larger part of the population to become an integrated part of the economy. It will increase the work opportunities and it will increase education opportunities, as well as giving people access to entertainment, right? And as we talked already from the previous presentations, there's a lot of interest about 5G network as they actually enable the content providers and broadcasters to reach a wider audience. 5G really stands out as revolutionary for its high speed and low latency. This is actually a big evolution from previous technology. So what 5G will do is open up many new business model and revenue opportunities by offering, the same service we have to consumers today on 4G, but also within the business operations themselves, as we mentioned earlier. There will be cost savings, there will be more efficiency because data transfer is faster and more reliable. And as we talked about, as Mr. Hari talked about as well, it will enable new use cases that need the ultra low latency and high capacity that 5G is capable of. Consumers, on the other hand, they will have access to much, much better quality mobile access. We talk about mobile streaming all the times, even on the move or in crowded areas. Telcos, they will be able to provide the digital experience, right? Such virtual reality, ultra HD, and so forth. And telcos, this is very important, will also be able to offer competitive packages and solutions to the global big content providers like Netflix, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. The local telcos is the last mile. So they can actually deliver the highest quality and the highest service to the huge audience. And this is actually one of the really big differences between 4G and 5G and so forth. And it's very important. 5G brings the possibility of real-time data delivery. This influence use cases such as automation, self-driving cars, factories doing the manufacturing themselves, virtual reality, and even medical use case where medical treatment could actually be provided in very, very remote locations. We talk about critical situation where interconnectivity needs to be instant and reliable. If not, it could have serious consequences. And that's not usually what you use your mobile phone today or your fixed wireless access, but that is where we're seeing going forward. For the society as a whole, there will be a pot of potential revenue, both for enterprises and telcos who build a service on top of the 5G infrastructure. This is also very important. Keep in mind, 5G, what we're talking about here, is only the infrastructure. Services are not included in 5G. This is what we build on top of it. 5G is the freeway. We have to fill it with the different services that we're going to use. However, to enable this sort of technology progress, there are a few technical requirements that need to be in place. And that's where we start talking about future technologies like edge cloud and edge computing. You need the software and the hardware to make this a reality. And it's about putting the hardware and the software in the right place. We need to put it as close to the customer as possible to be able to achieve the real-time data delivery that is needed for these add-on services. Otherwise, we could stick with 4G that we actually have today already. So Varnish, and we have been working with telcos across the APAC and in other parts of the world as well, and building 5G ready networks. We are now moving towards the future that we have described here. So what have we learned so far? Yeah, the first thing that needs to be determined is the architecture, more precisely the distributed architecture. Companies have to really think about how to design the network and how information will be served between where the data is stored and where the end user is. Now the end user is not going to be fixed, it's not going to be a cable, but it still could be a factory with production and so forth. So we really need to start to think about it. Secondly, 5G service providers who have to deliver the end user experience have to start to fully utilize edge computing. With the help of the edge computing, you can create the layer between the end user and the main internet offload location, and it allows you to move the data much closer to the user. And thirdly, providers need to be able to scale, to be able to handle more demand from people being connected and streaming at the same time. Artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, as we talked about, will make the demand growth exponentially. Remember, today we have people talking on the 4G network. Going forward, we'll have millions, if not billions, of things and devices connecting and communicating as well. So I want to take a little bit of step back just, right? I will come to this. So a CDN or a content delivery network is a way to reach the consumer, right? It makes sure that the network isn't overwhelmed with traffic. Simplified, it makes internet smaller. A CDN that plugs into a 5G network can help actually reach the high speeds and high capacity that 5G is capable of. So if we take a step back, just so everybody's on the same page here, I'm going to make a very simplified version on how transport happens over internet and 5G, and I will keep on using the bus comparison that we used initially. The content owners or distributors create or purchase the content and store it on the servers. This is called the origin servers that sits out there in the network, right? This could be companies like Netflix, Premier League, Facebook, World of Warcraft, right? The end user, that's us over here, asks for the data. And in this case, the data will be loaded on the bus and transferred to the end user. A challenge is that these origin servers, they have a lot to do, and they're not optimized to do fast delivery to the internet. And this actually impacts the user experience. So how do you protect these and at the same time ensure performance? Yeah, easiest way is to install origin shields. This is a service that sits in front of the origin servers and only focus on caching the content and deliver the content. Simplified caching means that we make a copy of the most popular content and the users ask for. Then the cache server will actually answer the end user and send information. This way, the Varnish, the origin shield, take away the heavy load from the origin servers. And I will show how this connects to the 5G going forward. With increased performance, we will now have a very, very fast delivery to you. However, this isn't really how the internet works. The internet, this is a shared media. That means the more people and data being transferred on the network, the less capacity each and every one get. So when we have to share the internet with all the other people and with all the other services, the performance will be less, and there are risks for traffic jams and interruption. And very importantly, since it is a shared service, it's very hard to predict how the viewing experience is going to be from time to time. It might work one day perfectly and the next day it doesn't work. And this is not something we want to have in real-time data and critical services, right? So also think about if the service is far away. Let's say you're looking for a movie that's stored on a server in Europe or in US, this will really impact how fast you get the content and the quality of the content. So how can we solve this? We make the internet smaller. This is what we talk about. So we still have the shared internet media with its limitation here. But what we do is we install an internet offloading point. We install a caching server close to the end user. In this case, they should be, of course, be installed in Indonesia or installed in many locations in Indonesia. The service will then make copies of this, of the most popular content, and start to send it out to the end user. This drastically improved the speed and the latency and predictability on how the service is going to behave. This is where taking away the large part of the network that creates uncertainty. But how would this work in a 5G environment, and how is this connected? Yeah, in a 5G environment, we still have the internet. It is still a shared media. We still have the CDN. We still have put the content closer to the edge, and in this case in Indonesia, and multiple places in Indonesia. But now this acts as 5G, and everything looks perfect because this is much, much faster than 4G. But it is still a shared media, and with limitation and traffic jams will and can happen from time to time. So how can 5G networks and how can the ecosystem that's built this guarantee that all passengers having a happy journey all the times? This is the critical part for real-time data and services like medical or self-driving cars, manufacturing process, etc. Yeah, we have to bring the content all the way out to the edge, right? If the end user data need to go from the mobile phones, from the fixed wireless access, all the way out to the internet, or even all the way out to the internet offloading point, then the user could still be impacted by latency and performance issue of the internet and 5G network itself. But if we design the network correctly, we actually bring the content in-house and all the way out to the edges and utilize edge cloud and edge computing, we can fully utilize real-time data delivery. And this is now we can start to support critical situations where interconnectivity needs to be instant and reliable. But to sum it up a little bit, right? It's not only about speed. 5G is a long journey, and all the speakers before me have talked about two standards, more or less. We talk about enhanced mobile broadband, and we talk about ultra reliable, low latency communication. But 5G is evolving. So we will see many, many more use cases that will bring help to the economy. Speed, of course, is important, but it's not the only reason for 5G. It's also the ability to have more people connected at the same time. Think about events like Football World Cup or Super Bowl. No use of having a network that fails when it's needed the most. Also, it uses less power. It sounds simple, but it's very, very important when so many people and devices, Internet of Things, will contact to this network. And with more reliable connectivity and greater mobility, people will find their connections more stable. And this will also bring the usage up a lot. And even when they're moving fast on train, buses, or cars, this is not we have a problem with in 4G environments. So, and keep in mind, when it comes to the economy, 5G provides the raw infrastructure, not the service required to perform the different use cases. These services need to be invented, created, and implemented. And this really, really opens up a huge market for everybody that want to participate. To offer real-time services, you will need to do edge cloud, edge computing, and there are need for multi-layer of caching to further reduce backbone traffic between the origin, the internet offloading points, telcos, base station, and even substation within the telco. There should be no need to go back to the bus terminals using the previous analogy. If we do this, we have a very, very exciting future ahead of us. Thank you so much for your time. I added my contact details here, so please don't hesitate to contact me for further discussions regarding this very interesting subject. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. That was a very, very colorful and very friendly worded presentation. There's a whole metaphor about transportation and buses. If I may quickly, sorry?
Yeah, no, please.
If I may quickly summarize some of the key points. What Mr. Peter has done is he's taken us a step back understand why we have to fuss about 5G and CDN in the first place. And the key to that is high speed, low latency. If 4G is a minibus, 5G is a double-decker bus. And to continue that metaphor, with bigger highways, you have more data flowing in. That's where companies like Varnish come in. They help get that metaphorical bus to the user faster, less traffic.
Yeah, and just to spin on what the previous speakers talk about, we talk about the Indonesian economy, right? So we have to keep in mind that 5G is only the infrastructure. It's not the services. The services is where other people can start to actually make and increase their relationship to the economy and so forth, right? So the infrastructure itself, that will most likely be built by the big telcos and the government. But everything that's run on top of this is services that, everything from apps to whatever you want to invent will be able to utilize this. And this is where we can see this 20 million new workplaces and the big increase in the economy. It's not the infrastructure itself, it's what we run on the infrastructure that is really important.
Great. Thank you again very much, Mr. Peter. And
Thank you.
And again, if Mr. Peter has given us a case-specific study, we'll enter to our second case-specific study, but with a company with a different specialization, presenting our final speaker, Mr. Dharmesh Malhotra. Mr. Dharmesh has worked in ICT for over 28 years, serving in other big tech names such as Nokia and IBM. Today, he is here as the Managing Director, Global Service Provider for ASEAN region at CISCO, which should be a brand name that is well known among those related to the ICT industry. Mr. Dharmesh?
Yeah, thanks, Norman. So I'll go ahead. Are you able to see the screen? Just making sure.
Not yet, Mr. Dharmesh.
Good.
Yes, I can see it.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Norman. So today I'll be talking about a couple of things. So one is, I know my colleagues have already covered quite a few things, but my main focus today is going to be the impact of 5G in consumer and industry. And second, in terms of the key transformational trends which are needed to enable 5G holistically from a global or even from an Indonesia standpoint, and what we should do together to help, expedite or accelerate, the evolution of 5G, since it has so many benefits as we see moving forward. So first, the fourth industrial revolution. We've talked a bit already about this, but primarily the key characteristics of this industrial revolution is going to be that the mobile internet connectivity everywhere, sensors, artificial intelligence, as well as the machine learning. These are the key characteristics which are going to revolutionize the entire industry. And that is going to be generating significant amount of data as we move forward. And we are all going to actually analyze that data and take the benefit of data in our human lives. So it's so important that we have the technology which can actually analyze and serve this amount of data. Now that can only happen with 5G, specifically with some of the key features which we already discussed. One is latency, significant lower latency, higher speed, security, etc. So this is one of the big levers as we move forward to drive 5G. Now, what do we see from an internet standpoint? I think so we've all seen and come a long way over the last, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years since we saw technology moving from 3G to 4G. But now what is 5G going to drive? So firstly, from a global standpoint, we believe that by 2023, we will have about 1.4 billion 5G connections. 5G will drive a speed of about 574 Mbps. And then the M2M modules, the machine-to-machine devices are going to about 14.7 billion globally, which are going to generate that amount of data. Okay, this is out of a total about 29 billion devices, connected devices. Now, what does that mean for Indonesia specifically? We believe that about by 2023 or so, we're going to be about 30 million 5G connections. I know my friend Harry talked about 100 million by 25, which I think so is spot on in terms, at least, once we start moving on. The second is the speed of 5G would be in excess of 200 Mbps in Indonesia. And the M2M connections close to about 134 or 135 million connections. So if we see today Indonesia, a significant connectivity is through fixed line, as in a fixed broadband, okay, which provides good amount of speed and reliability. That even by 2023, we are likely to reach about 40 Mbps, etc. So when you see the 5G speeds, it's a complete revolution from where we are standing at this point of time. So even when you compare to a fixed broadband, this is going to be a significant improvement from a consumer experience standpoint and the application which our friends in Indonesia are able to enjoy. Now, a couple of things, Indonesia is vast. So few of the other things which this will enable, as we talked earlier, fixed wireless access. It's very difficult to get the fixed broadband to islands which are isolated. I know the government has tried everything, and but still there are areas where you cannot lay the fiber optic. So those are the areas where you can actually roll out 5G and get those users the right amount of experience and the speed. So I think so that'll be critical application for Indonesia, and big use case, I will say, from a consumer standpoint. And then the other is the online gaming. We'll go a bit more in detail, etc. I'm sure, Indonesia population, friends, the younger population do enjoy this whole gaming experience. And I think so 5G is going to make a big difference in actually enabling people to have much more fun as we move forward on that one. So what else, What are the industries we will see likely to be disrupted? Automotive. This is a survey globally, 70% big disruption, driverless cars we talked about. Now, Indonesia may take a time to get there, okay, but this is a big use. Cloud services, we already see happening. Manufacturing. Indonesia is a big manufacturing base. And to get into smart factories, doing repetitive works and getting it to the robotics, etc., needs the amount of reliability and latency which 5G can provide, but not 4G at this point of time. Retail sector, online gaming and video, we talked about it. Healthcare. I see healthcare could be another big thing from Indonesia standpoint, because you cannot get expertise everywhere across the board in Indonesia just because it's so huge and diverse. So if we have reliable connectivity, we can actually make sure that people who are in outskirts of islands, maybe towards Sulawesi, outskirts, Papua, etc., can get that, expertise from a doctor standpoint, sitting in Jakarta or somewhere else globally as well. So I believe that's the other big thing which can take off from an Indonesia standpoint. But these are the industries which are likely to see big disruptions, and disruption from a benefit standpoint as we move forward. So yes, but this does not come, it has a cost to it. So likely Indonesia will also see, and it is across ASEAN, it's across global, there will be transformations in networks needed, there will be transformation in the enterprises needed, etc. So holistically, Indonesia is likely to see another 4 to 6 billion of CapEx spending from now up to about 2025 over a period of the next 5-6 years. Yeah, so it's going to be a spend, but I think so there are clear benefits which some of my friends already talked about as well. but there are clear benefits to the population of Indonesia. Projected 5G penetration, I think, so we talked about it's close to about by 2024. We talked about Indonesia getting to 13% or so, which is still sizable, very, very similar to what I already talked about. So now coming to what are the key transformational shifts? What will be needed from a network standpoint, first of all, to make sure that 5G is enabled properly? So first of all, so far we've seen technology progressively changing. 2G came initially, then 3G, then 4G, and now we're moving to 5G. So the networks have become very complex. So what we will see with 5G, we'll see with 5G, the networks getting transformed and getting more simple, agile with the automation, because this is going to be a big thing as we move forward. So that's one aspect which will happen. Second, data center transformation. Data is knowledge today, and it is about utilizing the data where the data actually gets generated. So earlier we used to have this centralized data center concepts where all the data from wherever it got generated used to come centrally. But now with 5G, to take the benefit of where the data is going to be generated, the data centers will get disaggregated to the edge. So they will be into remote islands. They will be into different cities across Indonesia, etc. And they will need to have the security there and that itself. Okay, so the data can be actually created, generated, analyzed, and then used immediately. Third thing, Uberization, as I called on OSS, PSS. Originally when we built the network 5 years back, 10 years back, and kind of evolved from there, they are monolithic system buildings, but now it's digital age, okay? All of us do so much of our financial transaction or any other transactions, payment cycles, just by online, okay? So this needs to change. The systems have to change, be more flexible as well. So that's the other big change which will happen as we move forward. Last, not the least, but very, very important, is going to be the security. As we said, 5G is going to play a big role, not only on the consumer side, but there's a much bigger role which will happen with 5G on the enterprise side. So the service provider networks today, the operator networks will get into the enterprises. And with so many devices, as we've seen, globally 14.7 billion M2M devices, 29 billion overall network devices. Security has to be at every stage. It has to be right and center. So you will see as you move forward, security is another key aspect. And I am sure, as consumer, all of us today, when we do any transaction, the first thing we see is our network secure? Can we trust the network to do those transactions? So security is going to be another big, big transformational shift as we move forward. So I see these 4 key transformational shifts happening to enable 5G. Now, touched a little bit earlier, but I believe, this is what's going to happen. So primarily, the networks, the modern network is going to enable all these industries with smart services, okay? And is going to be the backbone of key use cases which are going to come. Okay? As we move forward, I'll touch a little bit on that one as well. So 5G Showcase Innovation Center, what is this? As we talked about, there is a big uplift benefit which is going to come from the enterprise side, the industry side. But it's very important that, it's not only the telco operators, not only the telco infrastructure providers. So it has to be an ecosystem which works together. And a lot of these use cases we talked about healthcare use cases, could be remote surgery. We talk about AR, VR use cases. We talked about robotics from a manufacturing standpoint. There are so many use cases which could be potential use cases. But every country will be unique, and we have to work together to see which use cases are relevant most for that particular country and what makes sense. So that can only happen if we bring this whole ecosystem together. And that's what CISCO at the moment is also trying to see. So we have set up this innovation centers. And one of those centers is in Indonesia, which is actually going to enable, or I'll say accelerate, the country digitization process. So we will bring the telcos, we will bring the industry, the enterprises, and the eco-solution partners to work on these specific use cases and then take it to the market from a go-to-market standpoint. So I think this is going to be extremely, extremely important from a collaboration standpoint. So again, this is another example of saying, how will we make Indonesia 5G successful? In addition to the consumer side, we need to make sure that the service provider and the enterprise side, the networks will get interconnected. The service providers will have more and more automation in their networks, which will enable the entire enterprise networks. And of course, on the enterprise management side and the SP management side needs to interwork correctly with all the security related. Now, if you see, till about 4G, 84% of the service provider traffic was coming from consumer, and only about 15-16 was coming from enterprise. But as we move into 5G, you will see almost kind of a 50-50 balance. So there is going to be a much more focus on saying, how do we actually make sure that these two networks from a service provider and the enterprise are interconnected and working together to get the maximum out of it in terms from a 5G standpoint. So this is my last slide. So I just want to make sure that I summarize it right. The 5G opportunity is immense, and we will all get the benefit of it, and it is going to come in the next few years. Faster than we will all believe that it will come, but it will come. You know, we saw that significant change when it happened from 3G to 4G, how fast it went. And now it's the time to get to the next revolution, which is going to be 5G. Not only consumer, but also the industry. We will need flattening of the networks. This is more from a technology standpoint. We will need data center transformation. We will need more flexible OSS billing system, and we will need to have security, which is a key component to build 5G. Telecom operators, enterprises, telco infra providers, eco-solution providers need to come together to build this 5G use cases. Fixed wireless access, which is going to remote areas, closer to Papua, closer to Sulawesi, some of the areas where we don't have the fiber, will be key and provide that connectivity from an Indonesia standpoint. Gaming will be very popular. Knowing Indonesians, gaming will be extremely popular use case. Manufacturing, automotive, healthcare, smart city, all will be the key cases to benefit from an enterprise standpoint. Holistically, we will need these centers, these co-innovation showcases as I showed. I'm sure some of the other companies must be already doing it, okay, to get the ecosystem together, to create that collaboration, so we are able to make sure that 5G is accelerated to the benefit of Indonesians. With that, thank you so much. This is what I wanted to share today. Over to you, Norman.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Dharmesh. Very interesting presentation about the potential of 5G in Indonesia specifically. If I may summarize some key points, again, there is immense potential for 5G in Indonesia, as you mentioned. There's some interesting key numbers referred to in the presentation. 30.2 million 5G connections, 269 Mbps connection speed, and $4.6 billion in capital investment needed, which I noticed was bigger than than any other in Southeast Asia, because again, it's the largest economy and the most population. Many potential use cases, specifically, notably gaming, smart cities, healthcare, and generally connecting remote areas, Papua, Sulawesi, which I think aligns with what the government is trying to do in terms of levelizing economic growth. However, of course, ultimately, there needs to be communication and discussions about what exactly would be the use cases of 5G in Indonesia. And to that end, CISCO has set up an innovation center. Yeah. I think those are some of the key points I captured. So again, thank you very much, Mr. Dharmesh, for that presentation.
Always welcome, Norman. And I think so that'll also potentially with 5G, one of the other things I missed out could be the, this whole education sector. Okay, we see now specifically with the pandemic. Okay, but as we moved into more and getting expertise, it's all about, if the connectivity is reliable, it is faster, latency is good, you can get expertise from wherever in the world. So the world becomes more and more connected. Okay, so I think so this education is the other area which will benefit as we move forward from 5G as well.
If I may add to that, the pandemic, students studying from home, then there's been that greater demand for connectivity between students. Great. We still have 30 minutes left for this for today's session. With that, I'd like to bring in the question and answer session. I believe my colleague Trin has selected some questions for our speakers. Trin, hello.
Hi, Norman. Yes.
So she'll be moderating the Q&A session. Trin, the platform is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Norman, and our panelists. That was such a wonderful insight, and there's so many knowledge that we gained from your presentations today. Now we are opening our Q&A sessions, and a lot of questions are piling up in our inbox, and some were already answered, but we will try to go as we can, or maybe we can follow up or dig deeper the questions that already been answered. Now, the first question, this specific question is actually directed to Pak Denny as the representation of the government in this webinar. So, but there is this urgency to implement the 5G in the country, right? We also need to speed up the infrastructure support, which will be more BTS to be built. But we always know that there is this knowledge gap on digital tech between metropolitan cities and rural towns. So how actually the government involve rural communities, like providing education about the 5G and its benefit, for example, and so forth. And second question, how will the government make sure that the best quality service in the rural areas will be guaranteed by the government?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think it's this challenging question and also challenging implementation. So I think for rural areas, I think what we need to implement, what we need to do is the backbone and the backhauling, the fiber optic and fiberization. And we do have, I think, palaparing, and of course we need not stop there. We need to expand that palaparing either to the other option like expansion, the fiberization, or also the another option of technology like fiber optic and high-throughput satellite. And then also, as they mentioned, that we in the rural areas, actually the spectrum is available. The issue is that the economic scale is not there. So what we're going to do, the government do is put the subsidy. The subsidy, palaparing is one kind of subsidy, and in the very remote areas, we also subsidy the backhauling by satellite. And we now having the joint planning with the operator how to, make it a more terrestrial solution based rather than satellite. Because satellite is so expensive. Hopefully that we can have more, more efficient optimization way than to provide some quality of service. Of course, we cannot do alone. We have to work hard hand in hand with other ministry, the local government, providing some towers and like the fiberization with the poles and so on and so forth, ducting and so on and so forth. But we optimistic with the the omnibus law. I think we have some confident that we can work together with the local government how to speed up the fiberization in the big cities and also the rural areas.
Yeah, but is there going to be like disseminations or maybe like education's program from the government to rural communities?
Yeah. Yes, actually we have already so-called the programs Digital Talent Scholarship, and it's a program by the Kominfo and work together with I think some technology provider as well as one of the sponsor providers like CISCO. We have already cooperation with them, how to give them the free of charge education. I think through the internet, yeah. As long as you have internet access, you can have that opportunity. We have a lot of the application. Of course, we need to select the potential, but I think that's still going on, and hopefully we can expand that program to other the next year, and then hopefully with other providers.
Yeah, it's very interesting about the digital scholarship, because if I'm not mistaken, the quota is 50,000, right, for this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Denny, for the wonderful answers. Now, moving up to the next questions. This is actually the question that has been answered in the Q&A box, but I think it is really important to be follow up and maybe to be talked about. The first is about can device-to-device capability in 5G change some business processes in the information and communication technology industry? And especially talking about the price, is the 5G technology going to be cheaper than the 4G technology? And this time, I think this question can be answered by all panelists, but let's start from Pak Hari. Pak Hari.
Thanks. So when you talk about cheap, are you talking about the price of the device or the price of the connection? I didn't fully understand.
The price of the 5G tech, and also maybe the price also for the connections, because this is talking about the price as a whole from the participants.
Okay, understood. Yeah. I think the price of, let's start with what we first think about, right? I think the price of devices will drop in the initial stages. We expect to see higher prices, and just like it happened for 4G, I think the price should drop. And globally, that's been the experience. Especially now because the primary cost is the chipset cost that goes into the device, and those prices as scale increases, I think those tend to drop. And we will see the same thing on M2M devices as well, which is the machine-to-machine IoT sensors, things like that you use for industrial use cases. Those also we expect significant drop. Now, the price of the connection eventually will come down to 2 or 3 things in every market. The launching price of 5G in many markets on a per GB basis has been comparable to 4G. In many markets has been slightly lower, and I don't see why it should be very different. But we also see that the total usage of 5G tends to go up, because people find a lot more use cases, a lot more need for it. So while the total spending may go up, the actual price actually is starting to come down rapidly, even compared to 4G in almost every market you see. Now, and also it will eventually come down a little bit to whether a lot of infrastructure is shared or not shared, which means if the capex is too high, then it will eventually have to get recovered in some place. How spectrum is priced, I think, will be another important consideration. I think those 2 or 3 considerations will be quite important to determine the price, but I expect it to be economically quite attractive, let's say, for most users.
Thank you very much, Pak Hari. And follow-up questions to maybe Pak Peter can answer this question. Pak, can device-to-device capability in 5G change some business processes in the ICT industry?
If I just can, I will come back to that question. If I just can elaborate a little bit of the previous question, right? So we are building 5G together with telcos around the world, and I 100% agree with Hari there. I think the price will go down, especially we see Open RAN that's happening in a 5G environment. And just simplified, Open RAN means that you separate the hardware from the software. So it means you can more or less replace any equipment with any other vendor. And that means it's not a monopoly situation when you're building 5G anymore. So this will be a better price point for the telcos and the one who building this, and would be a cheaper service solution when they're going to maintain this system, because it will not be just the hardware from one specific vendor. So I think Open RAN will actually lower the prices for 5G, and we see that so far in the customers we're working with. And of course, the more data we have, the more traffic we have, the more we can sort of split out the price of this. So I think that's very, very good. The second question, if it's going to change the processes, to be honest, with the Internet of Things that's happening now, and we see a lot of devices starting to talk to each other, machine-to-machine communication that Dharmesh also talked about a lot. I think it's going to really revolutionize what we are going to see in the market, both in good and bad, to be honest, right? It's not always good when the machines are getting too smart and doing too much instead of people. But in generally, I think a lot of activity is going to change, and especially manufacturing, warehouse activities, loading trucks, offloading trucks, and so forth. More or less everything will have a 5G connector to it, and then it will be fully automated. Yeah, the limitation is endless. I would say the only limitation we have is our imagination, because if we have a real-time data possibility, it's just what we will do with it. That's the only thing, the limit we have, right? So yeah.
All right, Pak Peter. So there is always the good things and the bad things, but of course we expect the good things first. Yeah, right.
Of course, and that's go back to what both Hari and the previous people, Dharmesh and everybody else has talked about. It's going to create a lot of jobs, and as my friends from CISCO and Dharmesh said, it's all about the ecosystem in this game, right? It's not one player that needs to do this. It's not the government that's going to do it. It's not the telcos that's going to do it. It has to be everybody involved. I think the big challenge, and that goes to Denny and so forth, is how we finance this initially, because then when we have it up and running, it's going to be a very, very big piece of the pie that we all can share. But we need to make the upfront investment, and that's the tough part.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Peter. And moving on to Pak Dharmesh, do you have anything to add to answer the questions?
Well, just on this whole price one, in terms of the cost, there's been significant innovation, at least from a telco standpoint, which has been happening because the data has been increasing multifold. Okay, if those innovations don't happen, then it just becomes almost impossible. Okay, to serve the industry. So I think so. Companies like CISCO and similarly the others as well have been actually putting billions of dollars to see what kind of innovation they are able to do from a network standpoint to make sure that a per gigabit cost for data is far, far lower. Okay? It's kind of multi-fold lower, okay, to be able to make sure that is affordable. Because eventually, if it becomes affordable by the telco providers to build that network, it becomes affordable for the public as well, okay? So this is what I see happening. And on top of that, there's going to be a lot of automation, okay, which is going to make it much more, I will say, cost effective in the end, okay, with all this automation happening. So the cost base is getting lowered, both in terms of the innovation, what each of the companies is doing to promote 5G. In addition to all the handsets and all the other sensors, etc.
Thank you very much for the answer, Pak Dharmesh. So, following up to what Pak Peter had said about so many capabilities, so many potential that the 5G technology will give. But with ongoing uncertainty about the full capabilities and widespread availability of this 5G, many enterprises may lean towards alternate technologies such as LTE, Wi-Fi 6, and other various Internet of Things networks. So do you see, the panelists, do you see this alternate technology as complement to 5G or as a competitors? So maybe I will start from Pak Denny.
Yeah, I think my understanding is 5G is a complement of the current technology. When from the roadmap of technology of 4G, when you have 4G, it's easily you go into the 5G. I think you need also, of course, another like maybe a device or software application, so forth. But it's not like from 2G to 5G, but 4G, 5G is quite complement. So I think, and also Wi-Fi. I think well, you know that we have Wi-Fi, for example, is complement because sometimes the device, is it cannot only support the Wi-Fi. So I believe at the end, depend on the ecosystem of the device available in the market. And hopefully that, as the mentioned of the speaker, that the availability and affordability of the ecosystem device will be along the time will be affordable for most of Indonesian.
Thank you very much, Pak Denny. Moving to Pak Hari, how are you going to share your answer, Pak?
I think I agree with Denny on this. I think there is a constant evolution of technologies that come in, and as the sensors come to the right price point and those get deployed, I think we will start to see that 5G is kind of a natural evolution from 4G. That said, I think on factory floors and in some wired locations, I think if people are going through an investment cycle, because people invest in cycles on some of these things. So the earlier you can roll that out, the more of the early adopters you will get onto the 5G networks. I think that's the only additional point I'll make to this.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pak Hari. So, Pak Peter, would you like to add some answer?
No, I think the previous commentaries is perfectly valid. So nothing to add. Good answers.
All right. Thank you, Pak Peter. Pak Dharmesh, would you like to share your insight on this?
I think so. Just to add on it, I think so. That is correct. I believe there are some use cases which you can still do with 4G, but for there are certain use cases for that you really have to get to 5G. Okay, so you can start with 4G and then eventually kind of migrate to 5G. The other thing is in terms of the number of sensors. Just from the number of people who are going to use from a coverage standpoint, 4G can only cover about 10,000 from a per square kilometer standpoint. But 5G can cover 1 million from a per square kilometer standpoint. That's going to be a big difference, okay? Because once the amount of sensors and the number of people using, those sensors is going to increase, then 5G is going to be becoming more and more viable as things move forward. So it can start with 4G. So to me, it's absolutely complementary from that perspective.
Right. Thank you very much, Pak Dharmesh. So the next question is, with opportunities offered by 5G, networks becoming more open, but there is this lingering questions about cybersecurity. The growth of Internet of Things networks with large populations of unsophisticated devices, do you think will put more risks of digital attack? If so, what do you think the government should address firstly regarding this matter? I guess this question could apply also to all panelists, but I would like to hear first from Pak Denny.
Yeah, I think as mentioned the minister that we are working on the data protection law with the parliament, and hopefully that will give us the basis on how to manage that cyber threat, cyber security. And I think so we work hand in hand with our cybersecurity office, BSSN, and also the industry. And I think so we also working together and with the international standard body, that how to alleviate this issue. I think it's not only problem for Indonesia. I think the problem for everybody. So I think we can learn, we can exchange the view. Of course, there's some debate and one another, but I think at the end there will be some solution.
All right, thank you, Pak Denny. And let's hear from Pak Hari, because maybe you can share the Kearney's best practice in other countries about how to deal with this matter, Pak.
So 5G and cybersecurity is a very, very important topic. I think because of three or four things that are changing. I think one is the kind of unsophisticated devices and the attack surface, as it's called. The second is the network being faster and enhancing the velocity of attacks, right? So more things are connected and you can attack them faster. And the third important thing is increasingly cybersecurity has become, if you go back 10 years, 15 years, they were largely done by, garage hackers and individual hackers. Now there has also become a geopolitical issue, which is become a very, very important dimension of cybersecurity. And the fourth important element is 5G has become what we call critical national infrastructure, because you're not just going to have communication networks running on it, but you're going to connect power plants to it, you're going to connect cars to it, you're going to connect your railway systems to it. So there's a large number of things that are going on. Now, what we are seeing, for instance, if you take the US as an example, I think 5G cybersecurity has come under the purview of national security agencies. So it is not just governed by a regulator, but it's also become, the purview of national security agencies. So that is an important thing. And as Denny said, we are seeing three different types of things happen. One is increased, threat and intelligence sharing among operators and among various ecosystem providers. The second is a greater capability building and enhanced role for BSSN or CSA. For instance, if you look at Singapore, the cybersecurity agency has moved under the Smart Nation initiative, which sits directly under the Prime Minister. So they really recognize how important it is, and different countries are starting to do it. I gave you the example of the US. And number three is really cybersecurity training and awareness building, both for the industries that are providing it, but as well for users. And fourth and finally, increasing the total number of cyber workers that are there, cyber trained professionals. Because if you look at countries like Indonesia, and most of ASEAN for that matter, this is a skill that really has a very big gap, right? And it is going to be really, really important to train and enhance the cyber workforce in this country. So I think those are some of the things that we are seeing lots of other countries also.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Hari. So for Pak Dharmesh and Pak Peter, how is your service and products could ensure this cybersecurity issues? Maybe start from Pak Dharmesh first.
Yeah, sure. So, I completely agree. I think so 5G cannot run without a proper security system, which we all just discussed about it. So from a CISCO standpoint, we have been actually investing billions of dollars over the last about 4 or 5 years, okay, to make sure that security is an inherent part of every product, okay. So if we supply a router today from a network standpoint, the router has an inbuilt security, okay. So security is now, as I said, it's centered at every place, okay. So every product comes with its own security. And on top of that, even at a network layer, okay, CISCO has their own security system. So CISCO has been investing holistically over the last 4 or 5 years to strengthen its security portfolio. And today I can confidently say that every product it supplies, it has its own security systems inbuilt into it. And then on top of that, we also look at the holistic security, both from a network and an IT standpoint.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Dharmesh. And Pak Peter, would you like to share your answer?
Yeah, no, it's more or less the same as Mr. Dharmesh. We have every product has their own security implemented, and just to add of the previous topic a little bit there, I would not separate 5G. It's very, very important that we have the security on top of that. But I think it goes hand in hand. As I try to show in my simple bus analogy, most of the traffic on the 5G will come from the internet. So if we don't have the security on the internet or on the LTE or on the wireless, it is a complete ecosystem, and we have to have the same cybersecurity all over the place. And the difference is now that we started talking about real-time data with critical applications like medical or self-driving cars or productions, etc. But some of these things are already happening on the internet. The only difference is now that we bring it out on a mobile network as well. So we have to have a security that goes from the origin all the way out to the 5G and to the end user. And now we talk about Internet of Things as well. So it's not a 5G issue, it's a digital security issue. And once again, just to use Harry's example there, we talk about the 5G going in under national security. We can know about what US has been talking about, water fraud and things like that, what President Trump was talking about. And that we're talking about internet, we're talking about, it goes hand in hand with everything and need to be treated as one ecosystem and not separately as silos. That's a very important part. But from our perspective, we have firewalls in place in our product, exactly as CISCO have, to try to protect our unit and make sure that we do not at least continue and spread anything that happens in the network.
All right, thank you, Pak Peter. That's a very good quote. So cybersecurity is not a 5G issue, it's a digital issue. So there is one last question, and this question is directed to Pak Denny. So Pak Denny, what is your view in regards on numbers of telecommunication operator in Indonesia? Its consolidation between them looks like more feasible in 5G. How do you think?
Yeah, I think the consolidation, if you talk about the consolidation about merger and acquisition, is very, very difficult. But with the omnibus law, there's a lot of alternatives, all right? And then I think the most important is that how we share infrastructure, how we reduce the cost, and then how the operators consolidate to achieve that thing, whether they would like to have merger acquisition or other alternative is depend on them. The regulator, the government just put the policy and regulation, and then give the certainty when they, the necessity of the spectrum will not be taken back, for example, and if the spectrum sharing, what's the rules, what the regulation. I think that's the objective, and hopefully the intention is that how you will reduce the cost, and then but in the same time to share the cost and to provide the quality of service, deploy the infrastructure which is quite some number, and then provide the coverage as well to not only the business but also to rural areas.
All right. So following up to that question, maybe Mr. Hari, Pak Hari can answer this question. But do you think with so many telecommunications players, it's going to be bad? Because because there will be like possible price war or something like that. Do you think that it would be bad for the development of 5G technology?
So it's an interesting one to answer. I think development of 5G eventually will depend on three different things, right? It will depend on, of course, operator economics is important. It will depend on the government support and making sure that that ecosystem can be sustainable. And third thing is it will depend on kind of the use cases and how they come to market quickly. Now, a competition in that sense, in some ways, can be good because it can bring the prices down, which will drive up adoption, and it can make a lot of things happen. But to make that sustainable for the industry, you also need the right regulations, like infrastructure should be shared and so on and so forth. So I think competition per se is not bad. It's irrational competition that usually becomes a problem in most markets, right? So at the right level, all of these things should enable the technology to actually move forward if it is healthy.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Hari. So, Pak Dharmesh and Pak Peter, would you like to have something to add about the price war between telecommunications operators?
Honestly, that's interest from a market standpoint. It depends on that. And I hope, I think so 5G itself adds so much value, okay, to the consumers in terms of the kind of experience they get, and also adds to the holistic, 5G enterprise use cases. So the market actually grows much bigger. So rather than actually getting into a price war, it becomes a healthy competition because the market enlarges and every operator has enough to take from that perspective. So this is how I see it. So I see rather, yes, it can lead to a price war. It can happen always, depending on how many operators, how the market's moving, etc. Okay. But my view, my focus on 5G is 5G will enable many more things, okay, which may actually not lead to a price war, but actually to how to create an experience from that perspective, which people are happy and the whole ecosystem works accordingly. That'll be a healthy thing to do.
All right. Thank you, Pak
I
Dharmesh.
agree.
Pak Peter?
This is a very, very interesting question and very hard. It more goes into a little bit over your political view, if you believe in a free market and so forth, right? But I will only say like this: a healthy competition, I think, is good for evolution, development, innovation, and for the end users in a whole. But it should be a healthy and realistic competition that I think will gain for everybody, actually, to be honest.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Peter. I'm afraid that is a wrap for our Q&A sessions, and this is also marking the end for today's program. What an insightful and engaging discussions we just had. So thank you very much to all speakers and participants for joining us today in the Jakarta-Post webinar, Jakpost Up Close 5G and the Future of Tech in Indonesia. On behalf of the Jakarta-Post, I would like to apologize that several questions could not be delivered to our panelists due to time constraint. Nevertheless, we always thank you for your enthusiasms. So we will have another webinar coming up, so stay updated through our social media account, the Jakarta-Post on Facebook, at Jakpost on Twitter, and at Jakpost Images on Instagram. Before we officially close this program, I'm going to invite all the panelists and also Norman to smile at their camera, and we will take a photo. So I will count 1, 2, 3, all right? 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. So as one last note, good journalism need your support. Please consider subscribing to the Jakarta-Post by going to thejakartapost.com/packages. With 600,000 rupiah per year, you'll get our premium content, deep investigation report, and so forth. I am Indah, signing off as your MC. See you on the next Jakpost program, and thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.